7 years ago, when I first started using Procreate, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know which brushes to use, how to draw shadows, or how to even blend colors properly. I learned Procreate the hard way, so you don't have to. So today's video isn't a giant manual of every single button in the app. It's more like how I personally use Procreate every single day, the tools that I actually love, the shortcuts that save me time, and the little tricks I wish I knew from the start. So whether you're just opening Procreate or you've been drawing for a while, I'm pretty sure you'll find something here to make your art life easier. And I know this video is a bit long, so I added timestamps to make it easy for you to jump to any part you need. So yeah, grab your iPad, get cozy, and let's get started. We're opening up the Procreate app, and this right here is our gallery. All the stuff you've drawn will show up here. Every now and then I try to clean up my gallery because it takes up a lot of space in Procreate and on the iPad in general. At one point I had so many files that Procreate was taking up 140 gigs. Everything was lagging like crazy. So after that I started deleting stuff I didn't need or backing it up to the cloud. So yeah, if you're duplicating your work a lot or keeping files you don't even like anymore, just save them to the cloud and don't clutter your gallery for no reason. It will save space and your iPad will run smoother. Basically, I just create new files here, and if I need to organize things a bit, it's super simple. Like here I've got one file with an eye and over here is another one. If I want to group them together, I just tap and hold with a pencil or my finger, drag one onto the other, and it stacks them. And now I've got this little pile of files all in one place, which is super handy. And if I want to add more stuff to that stack, I just drag another file over, hold it on top of the stack, and it opens up the folder for me. Super easy. One thing though, be careful with your fingers. Like I just accidentally tapped something, and if you swipe left on the file, you get the options to share, duplicate, or delete. I've had a few moments where I accidentally hit delete without realizing and it's gone. Okay, let me show you on a random file I don't need. Let's say this one. I tap delete and it does ask, are you sure? But it's still easy to hit it by mistake if you're moving too fast. I swear that's probably how I lost a couple pieces. They just vanished from my gallery and I couldn't get them back. Pretty much impossible to recover once they're gone. And now there is a way to try and get back stuff that disappeared because of some bug or glitch. Yeah, that's happened to me too. You go to the top left, tap on Procreate, and hit Start Gallery Recovery. Sometimes that can bring back files the app itself randomly deleted. But just a heads up, if you deleted something yourself, this won't bring it back. Alright, moving on, and let's create a new file. I hit the little plus icon and I pretty much always go with A4 size. It's my favorite. It's big enough, doesn't get pixelated, and the resolution and proportions just work perfectly for me. If I'm just doodling something quick or casual, I might use screen size, but most of the time I go with A4. Then just rotate it with my fingers however I want, portrait or landscape. Now, Procreate has a ton of tools, effects, settings, you name it. But here's the thing, I don't use all of them. And honestly, I wouldn't recommend trying to learn everything at once either. Especially if you're just starting out, it's way too easy to get overwhelmed. And my advice, just focus on the stuff you actually need right now. Keep it simple. Once you feel more confident and comfortable, you can start exploring more tools, trying new things, experimenting. That part's fun, but don't rush it. Okay, let's start with the basic gestures I use all the time. You probably already figured this out, but you can move your canvas around with your fingers, zoom in, zoom out, rotate it however you like. It's super easy and super useful. Okay, what else? Say you draw something and then you want to undo it. Just tap with 2 fingers. Want to bring it back? Tap with 3 fingers. That's it. And you will also see 2 sliders here on the side. One controls your brush size and the other one is for brush opacity. And I just want to say I almost never touch the brush opacity slider. I don't really like how it works. Personally, I prefer adjusting opacity through the layer settings. We'll get to that soon. And I just feel like when you mess with the brush opacity, it can get kind of messy and the rendering doesn't look as clean. But that's just my opinion though. Okay, most of my brushes are already set up the way I like them, so I control opacity through the pressure, like how hard I press with the pencil. That gives me more control and keeps the render looking nice and clean. Also, I've got the little square button set up for the eyedropper tool. I mainly use it during rendering. It's probably the tool I use the most. You can use a gesture to pick colors too. Just tap and hold on the screen and it will select the color under your finger. But honestly, when you're in the middle of rendering, that method is kind of annoying. You have to hold it for a second and it just slows you down. Procreate does let you adjust the delay for how long you have to hold, but for me it's just way easier to work with both hands. I tap the little square when I need to pick a color and I just keep going. Super smooth. Alright, moving on, let's open the wrench icon as a little gear up top. This is where all the settings live. Okay, let's start with the basics, and one of the most useful things here is the ability to add an image to your canvas, let's say a reference. You can also import a file or take a photo with your iPad camera, which I've literally never done. I pretty much only use insert a photo. You can also add text. I usually only use text when I'm doing graphic design stuff in Procreate, which, not gonna lie, I'm not a huge fan of. But sometimes it's necessary and it's just faster to do it in here in Procreate than jumping over to Photoshop. If you want to add text, just a heads up, it might take a little fiddling with the settings. The controls are a bit clunky at first, but you get used to it. I'm not gonna spend much time on that though, because what I really want to focus on is the drawing part. So let's say you want to add an image like a reference photo to your canvas. Super simple, you just pick the image and drop it right onto the canvas. I do this all the time when I'm sketching from reference or breaking things down. You can make it lighter by adjusting the opacity, but the first thing I always recommend is lock that layer, just in case. That way you won't accidentally draw over your reference and it's way easier to work on new layers for everything else. And if you're worried about messing something up, just lock those layers too. So that's basically my number one tip, seriously. I've made this mistake so many times. I would start sketching on the same layer as my reference, and then later I would try to make the sketch transparent, only to realize the reference disappears too. Not the end of the world, of course, but it's a pain to fix. Save yourself the trouble, just lock it from the start and move on. Alright, now let's head over here to the next section, Canvas. First thing you will see is crop and resize. This lets you change the size of your canvas or mess with proportions. Tap on settings, and if you want to keep the original aspect ratio, just turn this little lock icon on and adjust as needed. I use this all the time. One thing I really want to point out, keep it in 300 dpi. I know some artists say 150 dpi is enough, and yeah, that's fine for screens if you're not planning to print, but just in case, if you ever want to print your work and hang it up on your wall or something, go with 300 dpi, trust me. And yeah, it might reduce the number of layers you can use, but working on a high quality canvas is so much better than ending up with something all pixelated. Especially for detailed pieces or big projects, 300 dpi is the way to go. That's just my personal preference, take it or leave it, but it works great for me. If you mess things up in the settings, you can just hit reset and it will go back to default. You can also type in custom dimensions here if you want. I usually keep mine in millimeters, but I'm gonna hit cancel now because I'm not changing anything. Alright, next we've got Animation Assist and Page Assist. I don't use this because I don't do animation, so I'll skip over that. But if you're into animation, you might want to check out Procreate Dreams. It's a new app and I think it has way more tools for animation work. Okay, next up, drawing guides. This one's actually really useful. I used it a lot when I was just starting out to help check my proportions and stay on track. So you turn this toggle on and you get a grid on your canvas. If you want to customize the grid, make it bigger, smaller, thinner, bolder, you just tap Edit Drawing Guide. Down here, I've got 2D grid selected. You can adjust the opacity, grid size, line thickness, everything. And there's also this drawing assist toggle here. If you turn that on, you can only draw straight lines that follow the grid. Could be helpful depending on what you're doing, but honestly, you guys, draw with your hand. You've also got isometric, which I've literally never used. But perspective, that one's handy. You tap on the canvas, set up 1 or 2 vanishing points, and yeah, you've got a perspective grid. Super helpful if you're drawing objects or environments in 3D space. And if you turn on drawing assist while using the perspective grid, your lines will snap to the perspective automatically. Oh, and if you want to change the color of the guidelines, just slide this little bar around and pick whatever color you like. And there's also symmetry, which lets you draw on one side of the canvas and it mirrors to the other. It's cool for certain things like tattoo design, mandalas, patterns, stuff that's meant to be super symmetrical and polished. But if you're a beginner or even intermediate and you're learning to draw, especially if you're working on portraits, please don't use symmetry tools. Symmetrical faces look really weird and unnatural, and if you get used to it, you won't actually learn how to draw properly. Alright, let's turn the grid off. Now let's talk about reference. I use this feature all the time and I highly recommend it. You just toggle it on here and by default it shows your canvas, basically a mini version of what you're drawing. Super useful if you're working on a portrait and want to see how it looks zoomed out. Okay, let me show you on one of my own pieces. Alright, let's go over here and for example, here's a portrait I was working on. When I'm doing the detail work, I open up the reference window and I can see everything I'm doing right in this little box. It's super helpful for checking your work, like making sure everything feels balanced, that there aren't any weird highlights or overly dark spots. I seriously use this feature all the time. And of course, you can also use the window for reference photos. I already have one loaded in here, and if you want to add a new image, just tap import and grab a pic from your gallery. I'm gonna leave mine as is for now. You can zoom in, zoom out, rotate it with your fingers, whatever you need. It's really simple. You can also move it around your canvas or resize it by dragging the corners. I literally use this every single time I draw. Alright, moving on. We've got some more settings here like flip horizontal and flip vertical. I usually use only flip horizontal and only inside the layers menu, but here they will flip the entire canvas, every layer included. In layers, it will just flip whatever layer you've selected. I will show you that in a bit. Next up, canvas information. This one's kind of important and actually super useful. Here you can give your piece a name if you want and even upload your avatar. I'm honestly too lazy for that, but it's there. It also tells you when you started working on the file. Under dimensions, you will see the size of your canvas. In layers, it shows how many layers you've used, how many you have left. Really helpful to keep an eye on, especially since the number of available layers depends on your iPad's memory and your canvas size. Then there is a color profile. I always work on this one. It's the most standard, most reliable color profile. If you're posting online, printing, or just sharing your work in general, this one won't give you weird color issues on different screens. Next we have video settings. This is where all the time-lapse recording settings live. Then we've got statistics, and I love this part. You can see how much time you spend on your artwork. This one took me 6 hours and 40 minutes. And you can also check the file size. Alright, moving on to the Share tab. This is where you export your work in different formats. And actually, some of my students didn't know about this and used to send me their homework as screenshots. Don't do that. When I'm saving to the cloud, I usually go with PSD because Photoshop can't read Procreate files, but Procreate reads PSD files perfectly, so I always recommend exporting as PSD, especially if you plan to open the file somewhere else. You can still save it as a Procreate file too, that's fine, but I also suggest backing everything up to the cloud just in case. You can export in PSD for editing or JPEG for sharing online. If you need a transparent background, just turn off the background layer at the bottom, then export as PNG. Super easy. Basically, I stick to PSD, Procreate, JPEG, and PNG. That's all I really use. Sometimes if you're printing something serious, you might need TIFF or PDF. And next we have Time-Lapse Export. You can export the full time-lapse video or a quick 30-second version. You can also preview it right here. The quality is a bit low in the preview, but when you save it, it looks great. And you can also choose whether or not to record the time-lapse in the first place. I always keep it on. It's super useful to have a record of your process. Like sometimes I forget how I did a certain effect, and having the time-lapse is a total lifesaver. Okay, let's head into preferences. There's a bunch of settings here, so let me walk you through them real quick. If you're left-handed, turn on this toggle and your sidebar will move to the right side. You can also switch between light and dark mode. I change it up sometimes depending on my mood. Go whatever feels good to you. Dynamic brush scaling is something I always keep on. It means your brush size adjusts depending on how much you zoom in. So if I zoom in, my brush automatically scales with it. Super convenient, but play around and see what works best for you. Alright, what's next? Brush cursor. I personally love having the brush cursor turned on. Like when I'm drawing, I can actually see that little circle moving around. It just helps me feel more in control. If you turn it off, you will still be able to draw, of course, but you won't see the cursor. Totally up to you. This one is all about preference. And there are a few settings here you can tweak for the cursor, but honestly, I just leave them on default. It works fine for me. And next up, pressure smoothing. This is where you can adjust how your brush responds to pressure. These are my current settings, and to be honest, the default ones work totally fine too. I haven't touched this menu in forever. I probably set it once years ago and just got used to it. Now let's check out gesture controls. This one's actually pretty fun. You can customize a whole bunch of actions here. For example, if you wanted to smudge with your finger, you can enable that here. Just tap the setting, choose which layer you want to smudge on, and go for it. Personally, I'm not a fan of finger smudging. It's way too easy to accidentally mess up your drawing. And sometimes you won't even notice until it's too late. But hey, if it works for you, go for it. There are lots of settings here, but let me just show you what I use. The eyedropper tool is something I use constantly. I've got it set to the little square button I showed you earlier. Other than that, I haven't really touched the rest of this menu. If you want, you can just copy my setup and start from here. And next we have Quick Shape. I haven't really changed anything here, but if you like using Quick Shape to make perfect circle, square, or whatever, you can adjust how long you have to hold down before it snaps into shape. For example, if you draw an oval and hold it, it will snap to a cleaner shape. And if you press a second finger while holding, it will turn into a perfect circle. I don't use it much in my work, but it's definitely useful if you need those clean shapes. Now we've got a quick menu. I don't really use it. I've never gotten into the habit, and honestly, I don't like tapping the Apple Pencil during work. It just feels awkward to me, but again, if it works for you, go ahead and set it up. One thing I do have turned on is the 4-finger tap. If I tap the screen with 4 fingers, it hides all the interface stuff and gives me full screen. I don't use this much either, but sometimes it's handy when I'm filming content. Basically, all of these settings are optional. You can totally dig in and set things up the way that works best for you, or just leave everything on default, which is what I mostly do. Other than that, I haven't changed much here. But one setting I always turn off is Enable Finger Drawing. If this is turned on, you can accidentally leave brush strokes all over your canvas just by touching it with your finger. Super annoying. Sometimes you don't even notice until it's too late and you're like, where did that mark come from? So yeah, I always turn that off. And now here's Selection Mask Visibility. Let me show you what it is. When you use the selection tool to outline something, you will see a bunch of little diagonal lines across the selected area. These settings control how visible those lines are. You can make them more faint or more bold. I usually leave mine around 20%, but you can adjust it however you like. That's basically all I use in the settings menu. There is a help button down here too if you're ever curious. You can even load 3D models to paint on if you're into that kind of thing. Alrighty, let's move on to the next section, adjustments. This is where you will find all the effects. Color, contrast, blur, and all that good stuff. So if the wrench icon was basically for managing your file, this section is all about adjusting your image. Let me give you a quick rundown of what I actually use and what I don't. First up, hue, saturation, brightness. I use this one all the time. The first slider changes the hue, the actual color. The second one is for saturation, how intense the color is. And the third one is brightness, pretty self-explanatory. It lets you tweak the colors on your entire layer. Just move the sliders around until you like what you see. Next, color balance. This lets you fine-tune your colors, like adjusting just the shadows, midtones, or highlights. I don't really use this one a lot. It's a bit more advanced, and if you want to get the hang of it, you will need to play around with it for a while. Alright, next up, curves. This is where you can either add some contrast to your piece or tone it down a bit. I usually use it in gamma mode. You just drag these little dots and it will change the overall look of your image. Just be careful with it. There is no simple contrast button in Procreate, so this is kind of the closest thing. I mess with curves whenever I want to adjust contrast manually. Then we've got gradient map. I never use this tool personally. I know a lot of artists like it just because it's quick for recoloring things. You can load a preset, tweak the tones, and boom, new mood. But honestly, I feel like the colors always come out looking weird and muddy, so I just pick colors by hand instead. Alright, moving on, we've got Gaussian blur, motion blur, and perspective blur. They're all different, so let me walk you through how I use them. Okay, let's say I add an image to the background and zoom way in. Now, if I want to blur that background, I go for Gaussian blur. I just swipe across the screen with my pencil and it starts to blur. You will see the percentage pop up at the top. At 100%, it's super soft. Basically, it just turns into a gradient. Next is motion blur. This one's great if you want to show movement. Like, let's say you drew something and you want it to look like it's flying or shifting. You can swipe, adjust the direction, and it gives that kind of whoosh effect. I use it sometimes for little effects. Perspective blur lets you pick a vanishing point and blur everything in that direction. It's actually really cool for adding a sense of depth or movement. Like if you're drawing a car or an object in motion and want the background to blur along the perspective lines, this can add some really nice dynamics. I don't use it often though. Then there's a bunch of other effects. Some I use, some I don't. So let's talk about noise. I like this one when I want to add a soft grainy texture to the image. Actually, let me show you on another work. And here I've got the finished piece on one layer. I duplicate it, then go into noise and gently swipe to the right. You will see the grain increase as you swipe. I usually leave it around 3 to 5%. I feel like it's enough. You can also adjust the scale of the grain at the bottom. I personally leave everything on default and it works great for me. Next up is sharpen, and honestly I never use it. All it does, it makes the edges look a little crisper and more defined. Not really my thing, but some artists like it. You can just try it and see if it works for your style. Then we've got bloom. This one's fun when you want something to glow. Let's say I take a brush and tap in some little dots or sparkles, then I go into bloom and swipe to the right. You will see the glow effect kick in. It's like a soft halo that makes things look like they're glowing from within. Works best on lighter colors, by the way. You can also adjust the intensity and size of the glow here. I don't use bloom that often, but it's great if you wanted to add some magical touches or light effects. After that, we've got glitch. I never use this one. But if you're doing graphic designs or something super experimental, it might come in handy. Then there's halftone. Again, not part of my process. I feel like it's more for pop art style stuff or poster effects. Looks cool, just not something I personally use. And finally, chromatic aberration. This one's kind of cool. It adds a subtle color split around the edges of your artwork, like that little red-blue outline you see in movies. I recommend using it very lightly though. A little bit goes a long way. You will see these colorful edges appear and it just adds this nice effect. Okay, let me show you how I use it. I apply a tiny bit of chromatic aberration, then go into motion blur and soften it just a little. After that, maybe I will add a bit of bloom to make it glow. It's kind of a decorative touch, but super fun to play with. These tools are perfect for experimenting and adding those extra little touches. Okay, now let's talk about one of the most important tools I use all the time in my work, the Liquify tool. Now I only use a few of the options here: push, pinch, and expand. These are the settings I usually go with. The one thing I do pay attention to is the pressure. I keep it around 20%. That makes it much easier to control your adjustments. Then I pick the brush size I need and just gently push pixels around to fix any mistakes. If you crank the pressure up to 99%, everything moves too aggressively and gets hard to control. So yeah, keep it low and don't forget to adjust the brush size depending on what you're working on. Now let's talk about pinch and expand. Let's say I wanted to make something smaller, like her nose. I just tap gently on that area using pinch and it slowly pulls the pixels inward. That's basically how it works. It draws everything towards the center. Let me show you what it looks like in higher pressure. See, it gets pretty intense. Expand is the opposite. It pushes pixels outward. So I use it when I need to slightly enlarge something. These tools are actually really fun to play around with. It might take a bit of practice to get comfortable with Liquify, but trust me, it's totally worth it. It can seriously speed up your drawing process. Next is the clone tool, which I honestly never use. The way it works is you set a circle on the area you want to copy and then paint it onto another spot. Could be useful in some workflows, but it's just not a part of mine. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the adjustments tab. Okay, now let's move on to one of my absolute go-to tools, the Lasso tool. This thing is crazy powerful. You can do so much with it. So what does it do? Basically, you can use it to select areas of your image, like an object or a shape, and then do all sorts of things. Fill it with color, apply adjustments like brightness, hue, saturation, add blur or effects. It's super versatile. You can also draw custom shapes by tapping around with points, like if you're making a silhouette. Want to fill it with color? Just tap the little icon or drag your color onto it. Now, when you're trying to make curved shapes like a circle or a leaf, they usually come out a little wobbly. That's because the Lasso tool picks up every tiny shake of your hand. So how do we deal with that? Well, we can't fully avoid it, but we can smooth it out just a little. For example, I made this little leaf shape and here I go into feathering and set it to around 1–2%. That softens the edges just a bit, and you can always use a razor to clean it up if needed. Now let's say I want to create a gradient. Let's draw a red rectangle here and make a gradient out of it. Then I grab the Lasso tool again, select a portion of the shape, feather the selection a little, and use hue from adjustments to slightly change the color on that side. And there you go, easy gradient. Okay, what else can you do? Let's say I want to grab just the lips from a drawing and move them to another layer. I use the Lasso tool to make a quick selection, not being super precise right now, then tap copy and paste, and now I've got the lips on a new layer. There's also an automatic selection mode. It automatically selects similar pixels, like areas with the same color or tone. Let's say I wanted to select the lips again. I tap and drag to the left and it adjusts how much gets selected. It's not super accurate on rendering images, but it works great with flat colors. And yeah, you can save selections to reuse them later. This is great when you're working on different elements like hair, lips, eyes, brows, and want to come back and refine those areas without going outside the lines and creating selections once again. I'll probably make a full video about rendering techniques at some point, and I will definitely show you how I use this in my workflow. But for now, that's it. Those are the most important things to know about the Lasso tool and making selections. And finally, there is this little arrow icon. That's the Move tool. It lets you select and transform whatever is on the current layer. Remember earlier I mentioned how I flip an image horizontally? This is how I do it. I select the layer I want to flip. It has to be a merged full image, and flip it using this tool. It only flips the selected layer, not the whole canvas. So yeah, it's just a personal preference. As for the other options below, I don't really use them. If I want to adjust the shape or proportions of something, I use this tool to stretch or squash the image a bit. Distort lets you push things into perspective. It kind of pulls the corners and angles in different ways. It's pretty cool and I use it occasionally in my work. Okay, now let's talk about warp. It's kind of like liquify. You can shift pixels around and reshape things, but with extra control. If you tap this icon here, it gives you even more points to play with, which lets you do some really funky stuff like, I don't know, maybe a super squishy cartoon face or something. A little fisheye action, why not? Okay, let's reset that. Alright, let's move on to a different piece and talk about brushes. Procreate comes with a ton of default brushes, but I honestly don't use most of them. I just don't find them super convenient, if that makes sense. You still have to tweak and customize them a little bit to make them feel right. I know a lot of artists use the default sets and love them, but for me it was tough in the beginning. That's why I ended up creating my own brush sets. I've made a few different ones for different types of work and I'm constantly adjusting and updating them. And by the way, if you didn't know, I have a free brush set available on my Gumroad store and looks like people love it. I also created a portrait brush set. It includes all the basic brushes you need for portrait painting, plus a few for details like hair, freckles, and eyelashes. Then I made a sketching set because I was always on the hunt for that perfect sketch brush. I'm still creating and tweaking brushes all the time for even better usability. And quick spoiler, there's a free update coming soon, so if you already own the sketching set, don't miss it. I'll be adding a new brush I'm obsessed with lately. It's the updated 6B and I love it. I also have a rendering set, a bunch of brushes that give different blending and texturing effects, and I use all of them regularly. If you're looking for brushes that feels great to use but you're not ready to pay, just grab the free set. It's got all the essentials and they're already tuned to work smoothly right away. Now let's talk about which default brushes might actually be worth your attention. I might have tweaked their settings a long time ago, so I'm not 100% sure what the originals were like, but for sketching, the HB pencil from the sketching section is really solid. One thing I would recommend is going into the brush settings, stabilization, and adding just a little bit. It will help smooth out your lines, just a nice little cheat in your favor. That's my pick for sketching. For rendering, check out the airbrushing category. There are some good options there. I would recommend trying the medium hard blend brush. It's super cool because it blends and paints at the same time. Honestly, I feel like I should do a one brush challenge with it sometime. If that one feels tricky, try medium hard brush instead. It's simpler and super beginner friendly. Now let's customize it a bit. Tap on the brush and go into rendering. And pick either intense glaze or intense blending. Then go to the Apple Pencil section and add a little opacity control. That's basically all you really need to make it render ready. These are the basic settings I would recommend for building your go-to rendering brush. And now about line art. I don't really do line art, so I don't have a lot of personal recommendations here, but there are plenty of brushes in the calligraphy section. Feel free to experiment. And actually in my sketching brush set, I do have a brush called line art and it's amazing. It responds really nice to pressure and has a soft texture edge that gives it a lot of character. I was obsessed with it for a while. I used it for everything. So if you're looking for a really comfy, well-balanced sketching brush set, I highly recommend checking mine out. There are even brushes in there that mimics paper textures. Oh, and by the way, every single one of my brush sets, except the free one, comes with a video and PDF guide showing how to use them. I used to buy brushes from other artists and then never use them because I had no clue how or when to actually use them. So I promised myself that if I ever made brushes for others, I would always explain how they work and what they're for. I will leave a 15% discount code for all my brush sets in the description. Now, if you want to create your own brush, which I totally encourage, just tap the little plus icon. There are tons of settings in here, but honestly I won't go into them right now because it's a lot to cover. But if you're curious, there are plenty of great tutorials on YouTube to help you dive into brush creation. Definitely worth spending some time on it, you will learn a ton. Also, a quick tip about this section. You can tap on recent and see all the brushes you've used lately. Even better, if there is a brush you use all the time and you're tired of searching for it over and over, you can add it to your favorites and it will always stay right there at the top. Super convenient. And you can also create your own sets and organize them however you like. Delete, rearrange, share them with others, all that good stuff. Okay, now let's talk about the Smudge Tool. Out of the default Procreate brushes, I would say the easiest to use for smudging is probably something from the airbrush set, but you do have to be careful with it and get used to how it works. Technically, you can use any brush as a smudge brush. Just pick one and try it out. One thing I'll say, don't go overboard with the Smudge Tool or your painting will end up looking muddy or blurry. You need to find a brush that fits your style and blends in a way that feels natural to you. And if you don't want to spend forever testing brushes, there is a mixed brush in my free brush set that works great for smudging. Say I've got some harsh edges or rough artifacts in the painting, if I want to soften them up, I just lightly go over them with a mixed brush. You can even tweak the opacity slider a bit to reduce the strength. And this is honestly the only time I use the opacity slider, and even then, only occasionally. Also, in my portrait brush set, there is a brush called Blender. I use it constantly. It's one of my absolutely favorite. It softens harsh transitions in a really gentle, smooth way without blurring out the detail, which is super important. And of course, pressure sensitivity matters. You can always control how intense the smudging is based on how hard you press. The last smudge brush I use is in my render brush set. It has a more textured feel and I love it when I want more like painterly strokes. You can press harder or lighter to control the look and it blends beautifully while still keeping that nice texture. I remember when I first started using Procreate, I really struggled to find a good smudge brush, so after years of experimenting, I can finally say these brushes do exactly what I need. Okay, let's move on to the eraser tool. Here you want something simple. I usually use hard blend from the airbrushing set, or I like using render brushes as a razor too, especially the ones that have both a soft and hard edge and that responds well to pressure. But I would avoid brushes that are too hard or too soft. Though sometimes a soft brush is great for gently removing tone from an area, but if you want a nice clean edge, go for something firmer to keep that nice dynamic feel. Okay, now let's talk about layers. They live right over here. Layers are a huge part of digital art and they'll make your life so much easier. So what can we actually do with them? If you swipe left on a layer, you will get options to lock, duplicate, or delete. To create a new layer, just tap the little plus icon. The layers at the bottom are in the background and the ones on top are in the foreground. I will show you what that looks like in one of my drawings a bit later. Each layer has a bunch of settings and yeah, it might feel a bit overwhelming at first. Okay, let me draw a quick heart to walk you through it. First of all, you can rename a layer, which is so helpful if you're working with a lot of them and getting lost. Try naming each layer based on what it's for, like hair, eyes, sketch, shading, background, so it's easier to find things later on. If you tap select, you'll be able to select the actual contents of the layer. And one of my favorite tricks, once you've selected something, you can create a new layer and start drawing inside that shape, even if the original layer is turned off. Oh, and if you remember, you can also save selections and bring them back later whenever you need. That's super useful if you're working on things like hair, lips, eyes, or brows separately and want to go back and refine them without coloring outside the lines. Next up, copy. This lets copy the object on the current layer if you need it somewhere else. I don't really use this feature though. It's actually just easier for me to duplicate the layer. Okay, moving on, we've got fill layer. If you tap this, it will fill the entire layer with whatever color you currently have selected here. Or if you've made a selection with the Lasso tool, you can tap fill layer and it will only fill the selected area. Super handy when you're working with selections. Another option you will see is clear. That just completely erases everything on the layer. Honestly, I never use that either. It's easier for me to just delete the layer. Okay, now let's go to one of the most important tools, Alpha Lock. Alpha Lock lets you paint only within the shape that already exists on the layer. So basically it locks the transparency. You won't be able to draw outside of what's already been painted. To be honest, I don't use Alpha Lock that often. I find it more flexible to just use Select, create a new layer, and paint inside the selection or simply Clippy Mask. The effect is pretty much the same, but with Select plus New Layer or Clippy Masks, I can undo or change things more easily later if something goes wrong. Another way to paint within a shape is by using a Clippy Mask. Okay, let's say you've got a silhouette and now you want to add details inside it. Just create a new layer above it, tap on it and select Clipping Mask. Now anything you draw will only appear inside that base shape. And it won't affect the original layer at all. I use clipping masks for shading, highlights, rendering, and lots of detail work. It's just way more convenient for me. What else can you do with layers? If you want to select multiple layers, just swipe right on each one. If you need to group the layers, just tap Group in the top right corner. And if you want to merge layers, just tap Merge and they're all combined into one. Here's what I usually do. At the end of each step in my process, I group all the related layers together, duplicate the group, turn off the bottom one to keep it as a backup, and then merge the top group to keep working on it. This way I can always go back and check my progress or undo something if needed. Let me show you on one of my own pieces. So here is my sketch layer. I always keep it at the top. All the working layers are underneath the sketch. Here's a base silhouette, then a skin layer, then hair, and so on. At this stage, I'm working with clipping masks, painting inside the silhouette shape. As you can see, I keep everything on separate layers, color, shadows, highlights, and I use different blending modes for each, which I will show you in a bit. Then I group those layers, duplicate the group, merge the new one, and just keep going. I repeat this process throughout the whole painting. You don't have to follow my exact workflow, but I just wanted to show how I manage my layers. That way I can always see the progress I've made. See, it's super helpful and I always do this. And yeah, it does take up a lot of space on your iPad and the file sizes can get pretty big, but trust me, it's better to have a backup than to mess something up and not be able to fix it. Another really important thing to know, layer mask. Let's say I don't like the shape of the hair and I want to adjust it. Sure, I could just erase it and redraw it, but then I lose the original, right? Instead, I tap the layer and choose mask. This creates a new mask layer above your drawing layer. They're linked together and you will see they get highlighted in blue. On the mask layer, you will see black as the default color. That's how you hide parts of your artwork. So now I can erase parts of the hair without actually deleting anything. If I turn the mask off, the original drawing is still there, untouched. It's kind of like putting a patch over your image, but without actually cutting anything out. If I switch to white, it will bring back the hidden parts. Also, if you want to move a layer or a group up or down in the stack, just tap and hold with your finger or Apple Pencil and drag it where you want. Okay, now let's talk about blending modes. There are a lot of them and honestly you don't need to know all of them. I will just show you the ones I use the most in my work. By default, layers are set to normal. Let's just draw with a light blue color on a new layer in normal mode, and then try switching to other modes to see how they interact with the layers underneath. First up, multiply, my absolutely favorite. I use it for shadows or anytime I want to darken something. What multiply does is it darkens your color and makes it semi-transparent, so it blends beautifully with what's underneath. Perfect for shadows. Okay, let's try it with a lighter color. You'll see how nicely it blends in and makes the shadows look super natural. Alright, next up is a blending mode I don't use super often, but it gives a really cool glowing effect, color dodge. It works best on dark backgrounds, so let me show you. I will darken the background and add a few soft gradients here and there. Now, on a new layer set to color dodge, I'll paint some colorful dots. Pay attention to how the color changes. So yeah, I recommend playing around with different hues to get a feel for how this mode works. It can give you some really nice results. The next mode I use all the time is add. I go straight to this one whether I need to draw rim light or create a fire or glow effect. If you look closely, it kind of burns the edges of the brush strokes in a really nice way. It gives this subtle, intense brightness on the edges. Alright, let's keep going. There are also two other blending modes that I definitely recommend checking out, overlay and soft light. They work in a similar way, but overlay is more intense and contrasty, while soft light is much more subtle. Let's take a light yellow and paint over parts of the image in overlay mode. So as you can see, it really brightens that area with strong contrast. And by the way, if you pick a color from the top half of your color palette, brighter tones, it will lighten the area. But if you pick a color from the bottom half, darker tones, it will darken it instead. Now if I switch to soft light, the effect is still there. It just looks a lot softer and more delicate. That's what makes this blending mode so versatile. You can use them for both lighting and shading, depending on the color and opacity. Super useful. And the last blending mode I use all the time is simply called color. I use it in two ways. First, when I want to see my piece in black and white to check the values, I create a new layer, switch it to color mode, and fill it with black or white. That turns the whole image into grayscale, and I kept this layer at the top of my stack so I can quickly toggle it on and off to double check my values while I paint. Second, when I want to recolor something. Okay, let's say I decided I don't want the hair to be red, I want it to be blue. So I just paint over it with blue on a new layer set to color mode. And as you can see, the shadows and highlights still stay there. The tone structure doesn't disappear completely. Okay, maybe this particular blue isn't the cutest combo here, but I just wanted to show how it works. You can also adjust the opacity of the color layer or go into adjustments and mess with the sliders until you get a tone you like. Just be aware that if the color is too light or too dark, it can start to wash out what's underneath. And you can also layer extra tones on top for more control. And don't forget you can use the Lasso tool here too. Select a shape, then recolor just that part. So yeah, these are the blending modes I recommend learning and playing with. Okay, that's pretty much everything you need to know about layers for now. Last but not least, let's talk about the color panel and how to work with it. There are a few different formats here, but honestly, I just use the classic mode. For me, it gives the most space and flexibility to find the right shade. It's just bigger, more visual, and just makes more sense to me. I know some people love using the disc, but personally, I feel like it's too small and makes it harder to pick the exact color you want. In classic mode, you've got 3 sliders. The first is for hue, the second is saturation, and the third controls brightness. Just with these 3 sliders alone, you can find pretty much any shade you need. And up here, you will see your recent colors, so you can quickly grab something you used a minute ago. There's also a palette section. To be honest, I don't really use palettes. I only have one custom graphite palette that I made for my sketch brush set because pure black was kind of boring to me and I wanted something a little softer and more natural looking. If you're painting portraits, I honestly don't think all those artist-made palettes are very helpful. It's hard to know which color is meant for what unless you have a super detailed tutorial that tells you exactly where each color goes. It's easy to get confused, and that's what happened to me when I was starting. So as you can see, I've got a few palettes saved here that I downloaded when I was just starting out, and they really didn't help me much at all. Eventually, I realized it's just easier to use the full color spectrum and find tones manually, and that's what I encourage you to do. Next up, Harmony. This tool gives you an automatic matched complementary colors based on your current color selection. Could be useful if you struggle with color theory, but I don't really use it personally. Then there is a Values tab. I'll be real with you, I find this section really technical and intimidating, so I don't go near it. And one last little color tip, you can drag the color panel out of the corner and move it whatever you like. That way you always have it open while working, so you won't need to keep tapping the color button every time you want to switch colors. And I know if you're just getting into digital art, all of this might feel like a lot to remember. But trust me, once you get comfortable, you'll pick up more and more cool tools and shortcuts as you go. Try sticking to the tools I mentioned, even if they seem tricky at first, they will seriously save you time and make your workflow way smoother. Alright guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video and you picked up something new. If you have any questions about Procreate, drop them in the comments, I'm always happy to help. And of course, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And that's all for now. Bye guys.